The Street Dancer. The neon lights of Nova City's elite district cast an ethereal glow across the pristine walkways, where beings from across the galaxy mingled in carefully orchestrated social hierarchies. Above them all, both literally and figuratively, towered the dragons, their scaled forms commanding respect and fear in equal measure. 16-year-old Zora Johnston moved like liquid starlight across the plaza stones, her human form a stark contrast to the gleaming architecture surrounding her. Each movement flowed into the next with impossible grace, defying the artificial gravity generators that hummed quietly beneath the city's surface. A small crowd had gathered, their universal credits clinking softly into her worn holographic collection cap. From her executive suite 40 floors above, Varaxia White Flame watched with disgust. The emerald-scaled dragon adjusted her designer optical enhancers, her lips curling into a sneer. "Look what the cosmic winds dragged in today," she muttered to her AI assistant. "A human, performing that primitive movement right at our entrance." Varaxia had built her career as director of the Metropolitan Interspecies Arts Academy on one simple principle: art was a matter of genetic superiority and financial status, not mere talent. The sight of this human girl dancing with technical perfection in front of her institution was a personal insult to everything she believed about dragon supremacy. "Activate security protocols," Varaxia commanded, her claws tapping impatiently against her desk. "This primitive performance is contaminating our environment. We have the elite charity gala tonight." 3 security drones emerged from the building, their metallic bodies gleaming as they hovered menacingly toward Zora. The largest one's voice modulator crackled with artificial authority. "Hey, you! Cease that activity immediately. This is private property." Zora stopped dancing but held her ground, her chin raised with quiet dignity. "I'm on the public walkway. I'm not violating any interspecies ordinances." "You're disrupting our patrons," the drone retorted, deliberately activating its magnetic field to scatter her hard-earned credits across the ground. "Vacate the premises before we alert the enforcement division." As Zora knelt to collect her scattered earnings, a luxury hover car pulled up across the street. Inside, Jackson Pyroscale, a real estate tycoon whose flame-resistant properties had made him wealthy beyond measure, was taking his 12-year-old son Maddox to another therapy session. Maddox, born with a rare condition affecting his wing development and mobility, had lost most of his motivation for treatment in recent months. But something about the scene unfolding before them sparked the first genuine interest he'd shown in weeks. "Dad, stop the vehicle," Maddox said suddenly, his small clawed hands pressed against the thermo-adaptive window. "That girl, she moves like the star dancer's mother used to describe." Jackson halted the hover car's momentum, and they both watched as Zora gathered her credits with a dignity that impressed even the hardened businessman. He had spent 2 years since his mate's death trying to understand life while caring for Maddox's growing depression alone. "Why are they being cruel to her, Dad?" Maddox asked, his voice heavy with the emotional sensitivity that often surprised adults of all species. What really caught Maddox's attention, though, was how Zora stood up, looked directly at the security drones, and whispered something that made their sensor arrays flicker as if they'd processed something deeply disturbing. Zora had whispered, "Your facial recognition systems will remember me. One day, you'll wish your algorithms had treated me with respect." But there was something else in her eyes, a determination that suggested this wasn't just an empty threat, but a calculated promise. As she walked away with her belongings, her gaze briefly met Maddox's through the hover car window. Something indefinable passed between them, a connection neither could explain but both felt deeply. It was as if they recognized each other as souls wounded by prejudice and abandonment. Maddox had spent his life being looked at with pity because of his condition. Zora had spent hers being looked at with suspicion because of her species. In that brief moment, they both saw something they rarely found: genuine acceptance. High above in her suite, Varaxia smiled with satisfaction. "Problem solved," she muttered, unaware that she had just made the biggest mistake of her 300-year career. She couldn't imagine that in a few weeks, the same girl she just humiliated would be at the center of a revolution that would shake the foundations of her elite institution. As Zora disappeared into the crowd, there was something disturbing about her serene expression. She didn't seem surprised by the humiliation, as if she'd known something like this would happen and was somehow prepared for it. More than that, there was a calculating quality to her calmness that suggested this wasn't just another random encounter, but a piece of a much larger puzzle. Running her hand over a sophisticated neural device hidden in her pocket, Zora's fingers hovered over its holographic interface as if she were about to make an important call. Then she shook her head and put it away. Not yet, she whispered to herself. An unexpected invitation. 3 days had passed since the humiliation at the academy, but Jackson Pyroscale couldn't forget the scene. Maddox asked about the dancing girl every day, his curiosity the first spark of genuine interest he'd shown since his mother's death. The dragon businessman decided to follow his paternal instincts, despite the objections of his AI assistant. Mr. Pyroscale, this defies logical parameters, Harrison argued as they searched the downtown streets of Nova City. You possess insufficient data on this human. But Jackson had made up his mind. After 2 hours of searching, they found Zora dancing in another square, her movements just as mesmerizing as before. Maddox roared with joy when he spotted her, and Jackson stopped the hover car without hesitation. You're the dancing human, Jackson said, approaching with Maddox in his specialized hover chair. My son couldn't stop talking about you. Zora stopped dancing, initially suspicious. Too many encounters with other species had taught her caution. But something in Jackson's sincere gaze and Maddox's radiant smile, complete with tiny puffs of excited flame, made her relax her guard. Your father seems nice, she said, addressing Maddox directly. Unlike those mean drones at the fancy building. They were cruel to you, Maddox replied, his voice carrying impressive maturity for his age. Daddy was very angry. He melted his favorite hover pen when we got home. Jackson made an unexpected proposal. How about dinner at our dwelling tonight? Maddox would love to watch you dance in our anti-grav garden. The mansion was a stunning structure of crystal and living metal that adapted to its occupants' needs. During dinner, Maddox was completely enchanted by Zora, who modified her movements so he could participate from his hover chair. Jackson watched in awe as his son laughed in a way he hadn't heard since his mate's departure to the cosmic winds. But it was during a private conversation that Zora revealed more about herself. Where did you learn to dance like that? Jackson asked, his wings folded respectfully. My mother was a dancer, Zora replied, a shadow passing over her eyes. She got a scholarship to the Prestige Academy, the same building where I was expelled 3 days ago. But when they found out she was pregnant with me, people like Varaxia White Flame decided her genetic line was tainted. Dragons like her don't believe humans deserve second chances. Jackson felt a tightness in his chest, his inner fire momentarily dimming. Varaxia White Flame, the Academy director. The very same. She destroyed my mother's dreams before I was even born. My mother died when I was 13, still blaming herself for not being evolved enough for their precious institution. It was at that moment that Jackson began to understand the calculated serenity in Zora's eyes. This wasn't just a teenager surviving on the streets. She was someone with a specific score to settle. Meanwhile, Varaxia White Flame was implementing new security measures to keep undesirable elements away from her institution. She had upgraded her security drones and installed quantum recognition sensors programmed to identify Zora's unique biosignature. We cannot allow this kind of situation to happen again, Varaxia declared to her board of exclusively dragon trustees. Our reputation depends on maintaining certain genetic standards. What Varaxia didn't know was that her measures were being monitored. Zora had spent 3 years not only surviving on the streets but learning technical skills that a girl in her situation shouldn't possess. You're very smart, little Maddox commented during a regular visit to the mansion. You have the same name as a legendary cosmic warrior. Zora smiled mysteriously. Warriors always have a plan. Then she showed Jackson something shocking, a holographic folder containing documents, recordings, and neural captures about Varaxia White Flame, collected over the past 2 years. How did you gain access to all this? Jackson asked, his claw waving through suspicious contracts and questionable financial records floating in the air. Invisible people see and hear a lot, Zora replied cryptically. And some of us are very good with quantum computing. The truth was more impressive than Jackson could have imagined. Zora had connected with a network of interspecies activists who specialized in exposing social injustices. Her ability to move unnoticed through the city had made her a valuable intelligence source on discriminatory institutions. All the while, Maddox was making extraordinary progress. The joy from his dance sessions with Zora translated into neural improvements that impressed his dragon physicians. "It's as if she's a natural therapeutic specialist," one doctor remarked privately to Jackson. "The results are almost miraculous. His wing development is showing regenerative properties we've never seen." While everyone celebrated Maddox's progress, Zora was completing something even bigger. She had discovered that Viraxia had not only destroyed her mother's dreams but had systematically denied opportunities to dozens of talented young beings from non-dragon species, keeping her institution an exclusive club for the scaled elite. And now she had the proof. More than that, she had a plan. The gathering storm. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected harmony to Jackson's household. Zora's regular visits had transformed not just Maddox's physical condition, but the entire atmosphere of their crystal mansion. The boy who had barely spoken for months now filled the halls with laughter and excited chatter about dance techniques and movement theory. But beneath the surface of this newfound joy, Zora was methodically building something far more complex. Each evening, after Maddox fell asleep, she would retreat to Jackson's quantum-secure study and work on her expanding collection of evidence against Viraxia and the Academy. "You're planning something big, aren't you?" Jackson asked one night, watching her manipulate holographic data streams with surprising expertise. "Justice delayed is justice denied," Zora replied, not looking up from her work. "My mother waited 17 years for an apology that never came. I won't wait that long." The scope of Viraxia's discrimination was staggering. Through her network of activists and her own careful infiltration of Academy systems, Zora had uncovered decades of systematic exclusion. Talented artists from dozens of species had been rejected not for lack of ability, but for lacking the proper genetic profile. Scholarships had been revoked, applications mysteriously lost, and promising careers destroyed, all to maintain the Academy's reputation as a dragon-exclusive institution. "She's not just a bigot," Zora explained to Jackson, displaying a complex web of financial transactions. "She's been embezzling funds meant for interspecies outreach programs and funneling them into her personal accounts. The charity galas, the diversity initiatives, it's all been a facade." Jackson studied the evidence with growing horror. As a businessman, he recognized the sophisticated nature of the financial crimes. As a father, he was appalled by the lives destroyed by such calculated cruelty. "What do you need from me?" he asked simply. "Your platform," Zora replied. "You're the guest of honor at next week's charity gala. You'll have the entire Dragon Elite's attention, plus media coverage across 3 star systems. I need you to give them a story they'll never forget." Meanwhile, Viraxia was preparing for what she believed would be her greatest triumph. The annual charity gala was expected to bring in the largest donation in the Academy's history, cementing her legacy as the institution's most successful director. She had no idea that her enhanced security measures had done nothing but provide Zora with additional evidence of her discriminatory practices. "The genetic purity protocols are working perfectly," Viraxia boasted to her assistant, reviewing footage of several non-dragon artists being turned away by the new security systems. "Finally, we can maintain the standards this institution deserves." Maddox, unaware of the larger conspiracy unfolding around him, was experiencing the greatest period of growth in his young life. His wing buds, dormant since birth, were showing signs of actual development. His mobility had improved dramatically, and most importantly, his spirit had returned. "Zora," he said one afternoon as they practiced in the anti-grav garden, "you saved my life, didn't you?" "You saved mine first," she replied, adjusting her movements to accommodate his hover chair. You and your father saw me as a person when everyone else saw me as a problem. Will you always be my friend? Maddox asked with the direct honesty only children possess. Always, Zora promised, though Jackson noticed the shadow that crossed her face. She was planning something that would change all their lives forever. As the gala approached, Zora made her final preparations. The evidence was compiled, the presentation ready, and the network of activists positioned to broadcast the revelations across the galaxy. But there was one more element to her plan that she hadn't shared with Jackson, something that would ensure Varaxia could never hurt another family the way she'd hurt the Johnstons. The truth has to be undeniable, she told her reflection in the mirror, practicing the words she would speak. And it has to come from someone they can't dismiss or silence. The night before the gala, Zora made a call on her sophisticated neural device, the same one she'd almost used weeks earlier on the street. This time, she didn't hesitate. It's time, she said simply to the voice on the other end. Tomorrow, we finish what my mother started. The pieces were all in place. The evidence was overwhelming. The platform was secured. All that remained was the execution of a plan 17 years in the making, a plan that would either destroy the Academy's culture of discrimination forever, or destroy Zora in the attempt. As she looked out at Nova City's glittering skyline, Zora thought about her mother's dreams and her own promise of justice. Tomorrow, the cosmic winds would carry a different kind of message through the elite halls of the Metropolitan Interspecies Arts Academy. Tomorrow, everything would change. The revelation. The night of the elite charity gala had arrived, and the Metropolitan Interspecies Arts Academy glittered with unprecedented grandeur. Varaxia white flames circulated through the main hall like a queen among her subjects, receiving compliments from millionaire donors and influential politicians from the Dragon Council. Her centuries of work building this elite network would finally yield the largest donation in the institution's history. We are about to announce a historic contribution, Varaxia declared into the hovering microphone, her smile radiating supreme confidence. But first, I would like to recognize our top donor tonight, Mr. Jackson Pyroscale. Jackson took the stage, his magnificent wings partially extended in the traditional display of dragon confidence. Maddox had insisted on accompanying him, his hover chair decorated with small flame-resistant streamers that sparkled under the hall's crystalline lighting. The audience applauded politely, unaware of what was about to unfold. "Thank you, Varaxia," Jackson began, his voice echoing throughout the packed hall. "Before I talk about donations, I'd like to share a story about true talent versus systematic genetic discrimination." Varaxia felt her scales contract with unease. Something about Jackson's tone wasn't right, there was an edge to it that made her inner fire flicker with anxiety. "A few weeks ago, my son and I witnessed an extraordinary young woman being humiliated by security drones at this very institution," Jackson continued as the room fell silent. "A 16-year-old human girl whose only crime was dancing with technical excellence on a public walkway." Varaxia's face drained of color, her emerald scales turning a sickly pale green. She tried to step closer to the microphone, but Jackson stopped her with a stern look, a tiny flame escaping his nostrils in warning. "But the story gets even more interesting," Jackson continued, "when we discover that this same young woman is the daughter of Sarah Johnston, a brilliant dancer who had her scholarship cancelled 17 years ago by then-assistant director Varaxia White Flame, because she was pregnant with a half-human child." A murmur of shock ran through the audience. Several dragon dignitaries shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while representatives from other species leaned forward with sudden interest. "Jackson, this is inappropriate for," Varaxia tried to interrupt. Jackson laughed bitterly, a small puff of smoke escaping his mouth. "You know what's inappropriate? This." A giant holographic screen descended behind the stage, displaying documents, neural recordings, and quantum-encrypted communications that made the audience gasp in collective horror. The first image was a letter from Sarah Johnston, pleading for her scholarship to be restored after the birth of her daughter. "Here we see Miss Johnston's academic records," Jackson narrated as the document scrolled past. "Perfect scores in movement theory, stellar performance reviews, and letters of recommendation from faculty across 3-star systems. Her only failing, according to director White Flame's personal notes, was genetic contamination through interspecies breeding. The audience erupted in shocked whispers. Several representatives from non-dragon species stood up, their faces registering a mixture of outrage and recognition. But wait, Jackson continued, his voice rising with righteous anger. There's more. The holographic display shifted to show financial records, donor lists, and private communications that revealed the true scope of Varaxia's deception. Funds meant for interspecies outreach programs had been systematically diverted to personal accounts. Diversity initiatives existed only on paper, while qualified non-dragon applicants were rejected through automated screening protocols designed to eliminate them based on genetic markers alone. Over the past 20 years, Jackson announced, director White Flame has denied opportunities to over 300 qualified artists from 47 different species, while embezzling nearly 2 million universal credits meant for educational programs. Varaxia tried desperately to reach the microphone, her claws extended and small flames spurting from her nostrils in panic. This is fabricated. These documents are forgeries. I demand. You demand nothing, came a clear, strong voice from the back of the hall. Every head turned as Zora Johnston walked down the center aisle, no longer the street performer in worn clothes but a young woman in elegant attire that complemented her natural grace. Behind her walked a procession of beings from dozens of species, artists, performers, and activists who had been working with her for months to compile the evidence now displayed for all to see. My name is Zora Johnston, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent hall. Daughter of Sarah Johnston, whose dreams you destroyed before I was even born. She stopped directly in front of the stage, looking up at Varaxia with the same calculating calm she'd shown to the security drones weeks earlier. You asked for proof that these documents are real, Zora continued, pulling out her neural device. Let me provide it. The holographic display shifted to show live footage from the Academy's own security systems, recordings of Varaxia's private conversations, her racist comments about non-dragon species, and her explicit instructions to reject qualified applicants based solely on their genetic heritage. These recordings are from your own secured communications network, Zora explained to the stunned audience. Every conversation, every discriminatory decision, every stolen credit, all documented and verified through quantum encryption that cannot be forged. Varaxia's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed into a chair as the full magnitude of her exposure became clear. The audience was no longer murmuring, they were shouting demands for justice, accountability, and immediate reform. The Academy's charter requires it to serve all species equally, Zora concluded, her voice rising above the chaos. For 20 years, you've violated that charter while enriching yourself through theft and discrimination. Tonight, that ends. The Dragon Council representatives were already conferring urgently among themselves while media drones buzzed overhead, broadcasting the revelations across the galaxy. Law enforcement officers had appeared at the exits, preventing anyone from leaving until a full investigation could begin. But Zora wasn't finished. She had one more revelation that would ensure this moment would never be forgotten or repeated. The dance of justice. The chaos in the Grand Hall reached a crescendo as law enforcement officers moved to arrest Varaxia White Flame. The disgraced director sat in stunned silence, her emerald scales now dull and lifeless as the weight of her crimes became undeniable. Around her, the elite dragon society she had cultivated for centuries was crumbling into angry accusations and desperate attempts at damage control. But Zora had one final card to play. There's something else you all need to understand, she announced, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The hall fell silent once more, all eyes fixed on the young human who had brought down one of the most powerful institutions in the galaxy. This wasn't just about revenge for my mother, though she deserved justice. This was about every child who was told they weren't good enough because of their species. Every artist who was silenced because they didn't have the right genetic markers. Every dream that was destroyed by systematic prejudice. She gestured to the group of beings who had entered with her. These are the real artists the Academy rejected. Meet Kira Starbright, a Altarian whose light sculptures have won acclaim across the Outer Rim. Here's Thorax Melody Wing, whose sonic compositions have been performed in the most prestigious venues on 12 worlds. And this is Zephyr Cloudwalker, whose aerial choreography has been praised by critics as beyond anything dragons have ever achieved. Each artist stepped forward as their name was called, their diverse forms and abilities a stark contrast to the uniform dragon elite that had dominated the Academy for so long. They were all rejected by this institution, Zora continued. Not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked the right scales, the right wings, the right genetic heritage. Well, tonight, they're taking back what was always theirs. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing architectural plans for a new institution, the Interspecies Artistic Collective, designed to be truly inclusive and democratically governed. Mr. Pyroscale has agreed to fund this new institution, Zora announced, where admission will be based on talent alone, regardless of species or background. Where no child will ever be told their dreams don't matter because of how they were born. Jackson stepped forward, his wing draped protectively over Maddox's hover chair. My son's recovery taught me something important, he said. Healing comes not from excluding others, but from embracing diversity. The Academy's old ways nearly cost us the friendship that saved his life. Maddox, his eyes bright with excitement, added his own voice to the moment. Zora showed me that being different isn't something to hide from. It's something to celebrate. The media drones captured every word, broadcasting the moment to billions of beings across the galaxy. Within hours, the story would reach every corner of civilized space, sparking movements for equality and justice on countless worlds. Varaxia, now in custody, was led away in electromagnetic restraints. As she passed Zora, she whispered, "You think you've won, but you've destroyed everything I built." "No," Zora replied with quiet dignity. "I've freed everyone you trapped." In the weeks that followed, the Metropolitan Interspecies Arts Academy was disbanded, its assets redistributed to truly inclusive institutions across the galaxy. The Interspecies Artistic Collective opened its doors to students from every known species, with Zora as its first human director of student relations. The opening ceremony was held in the same plaza where Zora had once danced for credits, but now she performed for pure joy, surrounded by artists from dozens of worlds. Maddox, his wings finally beginning to develop properly, joined her in a modified routine that accommodated his hover chair and celebrated his unique perspective. Jackson watched from the audience, his heart full as he witnessed his son's laughter echoing across the square. The businessman who had once measured success in credits and properties now understood that the most valuable investment was in the dreams of others. The neural device that had once hidden in Zora's pocket now openly coordinated with similar devices carried by activists across the galaxy. The network she had helped build continued to expose discrimination and fight for justice wherever it was needed. As the performance ended and the crowd erupted in applause, Zora looked up at the building that had once rejected her. Where Varaxia's suite had been, a new holographic display showed the Academy's new motto, "Talent knows no species." Years later, as graduates of the collective went on to achieve greatness in their respective fields, they would remember the story of a human girl who had nothing but her dreams, a dragon boy who couldn't walk but refused to stop flying, and their friendship that had changed everything. Sarah Johnston's daughter had finally claimed her mother's place in the halls of artistic excellence, but more importantly, she had ensured that no other child would ever have to fight the same battle alone. The dance of justice had ended, but the music of equality would play on forever. The end.